once I learned the lesson that life doesn't happen to you, it's happening for you, that was a big eye opener for me, because looking back, if you look back at everything you've experienced, you're like, okay, I see why everything had to happen that way, because otherwise, several things, you wouldn't have learned the lesson. It wouldn't have been as pivotal moment for you. So, but yeah, once I started really understanding what that meant, that life is happening for you, it's really up to you to recognize it and be adaptable to. I think that's the other thing, is making the shift to not, if something triggers you or upsets you or causes some kind of reaction, it's okay to feel that emotion or that reaction, but not to stay in it. You shouldn't let it impact everything else that comes your way afterward.
Welcome to Journeys Through Change, a podcast that inspires women to let go of the fear and say yes to possibility. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, creator, and empowerment coach who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders ride the waves of change with ease and grace. I now work with women to step into change and unleash the power they have to create a life they love. Whether you're contemplating a change in your career, relationship, health, lifestyle, or anything in between, nothing's off the table. I'll be offering up simple insights to help you manage the ups and downs of change, and sharing interviews with successful women who took a leap of faith to create the life they knew they were meant to live, sharing their wisdom, advice, and all the juicy lessons they learned along the way. So get cozy in your favorite comfy chair and let's get started. Beauty is defined as the quality or aggregate of qualities in a person or thing that gives pleasure to the senses or raises the mind or spirit. One could say it's in the eye of the beholder, but what if its acknowledgement is not prompted by mere aesthetics, but more by an inner knowing and acknowledgement of our deeper selves? At age 30, Amy Head was a single mom, twice divorced, searching to find that part of herself she had been looking for in relationships throughout her life. She had no idea how the strong will and independence she developed over the years would soon be channeled in such an unexpected way. As a photographer, esthetician, and beauty expert, Amy was working with women every day to shine a light on their outer beauty as she began to recognize her ability to empower them to more clearly see their inner essence, value, and confidence. Amy shares with us the lessons she's learned as she continues to come into her own as a mother, partner, and businesswoman, as well as the complexities she faced along the way to figure out where her own strength lies and the gifts she has to help other women see themselves in a whole new light. Amy, I'm so happy to have you join us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Amy, we're laughing at a few technical difficulties that we just had. But Amy, first of all, so happy to have you here. So excited to hear your story. I feel like there are so many lessons in your path. And I feel like we're going to we may not even get to all of them, but we're going to try to touch upon as many as we can. So to get us started, why don't we talk just a little bit about your background? Because I want to get people kind of grounded on where you came from, and then we'll kind of go from there.
I went into photography straight out of high school, and graphic design and the arts. I've always been kind of drawn to creativity. I had my daughter very young. I was 18 and went on to get married, had a son. We got divorced, went on to continue my life and chase my dreams and create the business I wanted to have. And through lots of trial and heartbreak, I went through some really bad things and didn't think I was going to make it out. And through a lot of hard work, I have found myself on the other side of it.
That is wonderful. And I feel like being a single mom at the age of, 30 that you were when you got, was it a divorce at 30?
A second divorce.
Okay. So by 30, okay. So you had been through it a bit by age 30. Mm-hmm. You had one son. Was it one son, two sons?
I had one daughter and one son.
So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Charlotte? I know you're close to Charlotte.
I'm about an hour or so away from Charlotte, but I've lived in the same place. Other than, around the local areas, I've been in the same state, same main area my whole life.
Got it. Okay. And you said you had interest in the arts. So how did that sort of manifest? Was that before you had your babies? Was it kind of during, after? How did that come about?
I've always been a creative person. I've danced, painted, I've drawn. I've just been drawn to the arts and everything creative and beautiful since I can remember. So It's always been part of me. I was in some special groups. I guess they were, you have like your gifted and talented groups. I was in that, but there was a separate group they had even when I was like 9, and it was for dancers, singers, of all the arts, and kids got chosen and recommended by some of their teachers. And I remember that bounced around to all of them. Most of the time the kids were in, primarily in one category, but I bounced around. But yeah, it's just something I've always been interested in. And I guess beginning in more of high school, I was on the yearbook staff, so I got really drawn to photography.
Nice. I have such an affinity for that because I did the same thing in high school. I, of course, I didn't do anything with it, but loved being in the darkroom. I know this ages me by saying that, but loved being in the darkroom.
I love it.
Oh, it's just that whole realm was just so interesting to me. And just what a cool thing to be able to be on the yearbook. That would have been key, the pinnacle. I would have loved that. So you were always drawn to the arts and obviously very good at it, right? So you've always been very creatively inclined.
Yeah, everything. I don't know if it was necessarily that I had natural talent in everything, but I was just drawn to it. And so I wanted to explore it. And I took dance lessons and everything. And luckily my parents supported that. So I was able to do a lot of dance competitions and do a lot of art competitions and be involved, with different projects. So they really encouraged that. And I think that's a big part of it, of why I continued to follow that path. They weren't very strict on, their suggestions or encouragement to kind of push me into a specific direction. Like, you should go be a lawyer, or you should be they never did that.
So you got to a place at age 30. Had you already gone back did you go to school for it? Did you go back into the arts sort of as looking as a vocation at that time or no?
I always knew that I would be an artist as a career. I guess I've just always kind of hoped for that. And, I had a whole other side to me where I was, analytical and techie. I used to work in IT. So that was also a natural thing that came to me. And I thought that's something I worked in until I was able to go full time with my side business of photography. But I was definitely always interested in planning to be an artist, like as a career. And I went into photography and graphic design initially after high school. I was 16 when I graduated high school. I skipped 11th grade. I was ready to get started with my life because I was kind of an old soul. I bounced around different friend groups. I was never in any particular kind of clique. I was friends with everyone. And I just remember that I just wanted to get on with my life. I wanted to get started. And it was my second year or second semester, I guess, is when I found out that I was pregnant. So I took some time off and eventually came back when she was maybe 6 months old. I started going back and finished, and just always kind of did that on the side anyway while I was working in IT until I was able to. It wasn't really like a perfect time. I just made the decision, I'm tired of being at this IT job and working on my website for my photo business. I'm just going to do it and see what happens.
I love that. Did you literally just declare, I'm going to move into this?
I've always been kind of an impulsive person. So
I love that.
Not in a bad way. Like, I was never like a reckless teen. Obviously I did things that I probably shouldn't have, as we all do, but I don't know. I've just always had this feeling that I'm going to just follow whatever I'm drawn to doing. Without, I would still think about it. Obviously, I would still analyze it for days and weeks sometimes, but I used to write a lot of pro and con list.
Yeah.
So that's how I made my decisions.
That's a pretty daring thing to do too. I mean, especially if you've got young kids too, just in terms of taking the leap and saying, I'm going to pivot and do this completely different. Did you go right into photography? Was that your main business?
Yeah, I started doing that on the side. I would do weddings, and this was before social media and like Facebook ads and things like that. And if, you had to be like a big agency to spend money on advertising. So none of that was ever an option for me. So I just threw myself into the wedding and event industry. I would do wedding shows, and I just immersed myself into it because I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And I was just so passionate about it. That's just what I wanted to do. So I just showed up at anything I could do to showcase my work. And word of mouth got around, I guess. I was doing a good job. And from understanding my specific style at that time was very edgy and different compared to your traditional style photography. And what's ironic is when I started in photography, I was completely anti-traditional. People with the fancy gold frames and the Vanity Fair or like fine art style portraiture, I was not interested in at all. And it's ironic because that's exactly what I do right now. So I find that just so interesting to me. But yeah, I started in weddings and it was more word of mouth and kind of ventured off into boudoir photography as well. And with that, I wanted to start providing an experience for women, and I wanted them to be able to come in and have a one-stop shop. That was my big thing, because a lot of times I'd have other makeup artists that had to drive to me to my studio. They weren't, the most trustworthy. They were flaky. They would cancel at the last minute, and I would be stuck there with a client, trying to give them this amazing experience, and my makeup artist is not there. So I just dove into that. I had always been kind of into makeup when I was younger, like in high school, but I didn't really obsess over it as much as, I ended up doing later. But so I just would do my clients' makeup, and eventually I got to the point where I just started teaching myself more about it. And then I went into the cosmetology industry, and that took me on that journey. I think at the time I would think maybe I need to do this instead of photography, because, as creatives in any industry, especially for my specific scenario and my circumstances, I would get burnt out. I was definitely undercharging for my work, but if you would ask my clients, they would say she's probably charging too much. But got to the point where I was doing it so much, and I was always on the computer editing weddings constantly.
Yeah.
I would shoot the weddings. They would be 10 and 12-hour days of me carrying around all this equipment and maneuvering up and down and doing flips and everything to get the perfect shot and to give them this opportunity where they could enjoy their day and still have beautiful images that didn't look too staged. So that was my big goal then. And I would get burnt out, because then I would have this multiple times when my son was younger. Not so much my daughter. She was a different experience with her because I was way younger. But as I got into growing my business, I was chugging out weddings constantly and portraits. And I had a studio in my house, and I was married for the second time. I just remember when my son was really little, he would have to sit on my lap while I would edit. And I felt like there was such a struggle of balance of being a good mom and making sure he got enough attention and getting my work done for my clients. So I would get burnt out repeatedly, like every, I don't know, but 6 months to a year on like clockwork. So yeah, along the way, I would find these different opportunities would come along for me to kind of venture into something else creative.
What I love to hear, because I just in seeing your work, which is really amazing, and anybody listening to this should take a look at your work, because not only is the photography amazing, but the artistry that you have with makeup, and truly it is artistry. And so the fact that you sort of fell into that because your makeup artist didn't show up, how funny is that? I mean, I'm not shocked or surprised, but the fact that that's something that you were able to really step into. And also, I understand what you're saying, especially if you've got two small kids, the grind of that, I'm sure, can really get to you after a while. So having that additional, and it sounds like you were pretty apt within the creative realm anyway, so you could move from one thing to the next. It wasn't so much you have that ability. So it feels like it probably was maybe felt like a stretch at the time, but was sort of a natural progression. But so you start working with women and you're photographing women, but you're also, at this point, are you a beauty expert? Did you start kind of moving into that in your business?
Yeah. When I got my aesthetics license, under that umbrella, I went into different little tunnels of paths of possible career directions, because I was always, I don't know, I always felt like when I would get to the point where I would get burnt out or just frustrated, I would, seek out these other avenues that would still be maybe one day beneficial to photography somehow. At the time, I couldn't piece it all together, but it was just another puzzle. But just that I went into salons and spas, and I was doing client facials and creating this custom skincare for them. And I was still doing photography on the side. And I would do lash extensions. I was like a main manager of a franchise that did lashes. So I learned how to do lash extensions. And then later I went into barber school and I almost finished, but basically it was a struggle between I had to maintain my business as a photographer or go to school because the schedules just conflicted with each other. So I had to make a sacrifice at that point. And then later on, I found myself getting interested in more medical aesthetics. So I got interested in cosmetic tattoo and permanent makeup. So I went and got certified for that. And all of these things at the time, I didn't know that they were going to come together. I wanted them to, but I couldn't figure out how that was going to happen. But I maintained doing photography this whole time. So that has been the definite constant. And I've just enjoyed like walking through an apple orchard and just picking and taking from different things that just genuinely interested me. And I had always hoped, like I said, I always hoped that it would be able to be brought together in one main source, but I never could figure out how to do it. But regardless, I was going to make sure that I was enjoying my journey of exploring all these opportunities along the way. So it was more of just, I knew that, I wasn't delusional. I knew I had to still make money and make a career, but I was just more fluid with my decisions. And sometimes those decisions would be based on personal drama that I was experiencing in my life. It would, light a fire under me and kickstart me into, I need to do something different. And so it's weird how my personal life and my professional life, they are very much interlaced together.
When you talk about your creativity, because it sounds like your professional life has been driven by creativity. And I've always been fascinated by how professional and personal experiences intertwine because they always do. Mm-hmm. So how would you describe that when you say that there was drama in your life and how it was always kind of interwoven? What did that look like for you?
Well, I had a lot of bad relationships, and that's even not correct to say at this point because I've done so much work. I know that I don't really want to look back and say they were all bad relationships because I take accountability for so much of that. But at the time, I didn't know. We always learn our lessons later, but just relationships that at the time I was only able to meet that other person at a certain point where I was at. And sometimes that didn't work out, communication issues, fear of infidelity, or just the worry of, there was a lot of codependency. There was a lot of immaturity. There was a lot of whatever. But the way that these relationships sometimes would end, not always, but sometimes they would be toxic or volatile, or I would feel very fearful for my life. I know that's maybe taking it a step too far, but at the time I felt that way. Didn't like people to get upset. I didn't like to have confrontation with people. And I think that stemmed from an early relationship I had in high school. It was a very possessive, obsessive kind of situation. So whenever I would see like signs of that kind of behavior, I would get really nervous. So sometimes there were very dramatic, just negative breakups. And that would, send you on a spiral of going down and not feeling good about yourself and, wondering if you're ever going to meet anybody that's willing to kind of complete this vision that you have for relationships. And instead of letting myself, I would feel bad for a while and feel, but I always would just, let me just do this. And I just would get involved into some creative project that I would just think up on a whim. And I would just pour myself into those projects. And looking back now over the course of my work, I feel like those were the times that I did my best work. And so that's how I feel like it was. I was able to take something negative at the time and instead of, expressing it in different ways, like anger or like punching walls or whatever other people do, or, I poured it into creativity. And I just think that's so fascinating to look back and say that something so negative or toxic or just bad brought this amazing transformation in a different way out.
Well, it's a wonderful way to learn from something that obviously was not probably fun going through it in the moment. But I also think there is something to be said. Like when you said that, I was sort of nodding my head because I think that oftentimes our creativity gets dampered down when we're honestly preoccupied in something else or preoccupied in dysfunction or toxicity or whatever that is. I know what that feels like in terms of coming out of sort of a dip or a downtime. And suddenly the creativity just goes way up, which I've often said to people, by the way. I feel like I've said this to my clients many times. That's something to look for, right? Because that's when you're the most open to possibility. When you're coming out of something, it's kind of like the universe is telling you that there's something ahead of you and you're jumping into it with this sense of creativity, which drives what you do, which is why it's so amazing. I'm sure that your business would take off during those times too, right?
Absolutely. That's 100% true. And the biggest change that I had in my life from doing like this big work after I turned 40, that has changed my life in so many ways. It completely it changed my business. It changed the way that I viewed money. It changed the way that I viewed my service of what I had already been doing. And this past year alone, I have experienced more things than I ever thought that I would ever be able to do in my lifetime. And so that's from doing the work, from this really, really, really bad place I was in to taking myself places that, I've always wanted to go.
Tell me more about that, though, that shift that's taken place. So was this something that happened right as you hit 40? Was this something that has been sort of coming along slowly? How did that shift take place?
I will just say this. The best thing that I can say about it is that timing is everything. And I would wish and hope and pray that certain things would not be the way they are, whatever they are. And you want things to change like immediately. You want this, you really need to make this money now because you've got something you really have to pay for. You've got a bill coming up, or you really want, whatever it could be. And you want it immediately, but until you learn that lesson that you're supposed to learn, it's not going to happen. And if it does, you're not going to recognize it, or you're not going to appreciate it. You have to go through like the really, really rough times to be able to see the lesson on the other side of it. So what took me through this process was that I had been in a bad relationship for about 5 years, actually coming up almost on the anniversary of 5 years. And it would be a breakup, get back together, breakup, get back together. And there were red flags from the very first date, but I stayed in that for 5 years through getting myself and my children kicked out of our house that we all shared together. That was one incident that happened a few years in, but obviously I stayed, or I went back later. So I wasn't getting it. I kept thinking, oh, this has got to change. There was a lot of alcohol abuse. There was a lot of narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse. There was nothing physical toward me, but it was definitely physical on our property. Holes punched in the wall, in the doors, really bad verbal abuse, calling me names, the kids' names. Horrible, right? Why would anyone stay in that? But I did, because for some reason I was just delusional, thinking it's got to be something simple, something I'm doing, something, I was still kind of stuck in that cycle. But I got to the point so bad where, I was still working on building my business. I had been doing this for so long already. And I remember coming home from one of my certification. It was actually my certification for cosmetic tattoo, because I really saw a future in this that was going to take me in a different direction. So I was really excited, and I came home from that. It was my birthday also. It was my birthday. And he was completely passed out, drunk, completely unresponsive. And I felt so defeated. And from that point on, I kept I created a plan to get out of that situation. I had already done it so many times before, but this time for some reason it seemed like it was more challenging or more difficult. And then time went on, and I just, things would continue to happen, basically financially, or unexpected mechanical things with my car. Just different things would come up where I wouldn't be able to save up the money. And I remember circling a date on the calendar that I wanted to not be in this world anymore, because I just felt like I couldn't get out. Like no matter what, I was just stuck in this situation with him. And I had my kids in it, and I wanted to get out and move, but I had already lost so much money from breaking a lease before to move in with him, from being persuaded, and an accumulation of just bad decisions along the way. So I felt stuck and I no longer wanted to be here anymore. And for some reason on that day, I woke up different. And instead of succumbing to that feeling like that I was going to make that decision to do that to myself, instead I was like, you know what? No, I don't know what it was because something just changed. And from that point on, I was so determined. I was like, wait a minute, who are you? You've done this before. Why are you doubting yourself? You can completely change your situation. And I just literally just sat down and wrote out every single, like down to the penny, everything it would take me to get out of that house, that situation. And that's just what I put my focus on. And it continued on to, well, you know what? I got myself out of that situation. I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to take myself out to dinner or something. So a little bit along the way, I would start pouring back into myself because I had not done that. I'm not someone who goes shopping at all. I just don't. I'm not materialistic. So that's why also I was more frustrated because I was like, I'm not even spending any extra money. I don't even know how I can't get this money to get out of the situation. Anyway, I would slowly start doing nice things for myself. And as I got closer to 40, which was basically the following year, I started doing more for myself and I would, go get my nails done on a regular basis. And it just got to the point where even when I met my husband, my current husband now, my third husband, when I met him, I kind of had this, I definitely had a wall up, but I've maintained my own identity. I've made that like a big thing. And he gracefully has given me a lot of space in that arena to find myself, to discover whatever I needed to figure out. And it's just weird because that's another situation where it was probably one of the worst points of my life. And it was like it was a springboard and it just launched me into this different direction. And so after doing all of that work on myself, mindset, I would do like these 3-day weekend free online retreats with coaching people through like their issues, shadow work, mindset, meditation. I was doing anything and everything to get me in the right mindset to be accountable and consistent with the decision I had made to continue to pour into myself and create like a better situation. And then it started pouring into my business. And that's when it really like clicked for me.
I think what's really interesting about what you described is that when you talk about taking action, it's kind of like there is that pivotal moment that happens where whether it's a voice or it's a nudge or it's whatever it is you call it, that you got up that morning and you had a different outlook. I think that we get to a place in life where like we can go along and you kind of know this isn't going in the right direction. And then finally there's just something. And it sounds like with you, it was really wanting to do something extreme that maybe, I don't want to use the phrase snapped out of it because it's kind of trite to say it that way, but they kind of shook you by the shoulders and said, whoa, wait a minute. This is getting to a point now that you have to recognize some important things. But it sounds as though now the relationship that you're in is honoring that too. So maybe you needed to be at a place in your life for that to happen, right? To really have that sense of confidence that you seem to have gotten. And I've said this to people many times. I mean, really, when I hit 40, something clicked. And I don't know how to describe it. And other friends of mine have said similar to that there's something about 40. I mean, not for everybody, but it certainly happened for me. I was like, I don't know, there's something, I am taking control of some things that I have not taken control of before.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing that people need to notice because some people I talk to who are well into their 40s, maybe into their 50s, they still haven't like experienced that yet. And those are the people I find I just want to talk to, like, how have you not noticed this? Because I think it's like a natural thing. Like as you approach 40, there is just something about it that calls you to just, like stop worrying so much about unnecessary stuff and really focus on what matters. That combined with any kind of negative experience that you have in life, whether that's like losing someone or a bad breakup or big change in your life. Obviously big transitions cause you to kind of do that at the same time. But yeah, there's something about 40.
There's something about 40. There's something about 50. I can say both. But I do think that, and everybody, and you probably find this a lot in your work, everybody's kind of rowing their own boat. So everybody has a different time, I think, or a time that they awaken to certain things in their lives. And it is very circumstantial, right? I mean, I can speak from experience. My 30s were very drama ridden, right? And then I got sober. So like that, you know what I mean? There's different things in your life that can be super pivotal. And then once you make that shift, it's like, okay, now I'm down a
Yeah.
completely different path.
I feel like once I learned the lesson that life doesn't happen to you, it's happening for you, that was a big eye opener for me because looking back, if you look back at everything you've experienced, you're like, okay, I see why everything had to happen that way because otherwise, several things, you wouldn't have learned the lesson. It wouldn't have been as pivotal moment for you. So, but yeah, once I started really understanding what that meant, that life is happening for you, it's really up to you to recognize it and be adaptable to. I think that's the other thing is making the shift to not, if something triggers you or upsets you or causes some kind of reaction, it's okay to feel that emotion or that reaction, but not to stay in it. You shouldn't let it impact everything else that comes your way afterward. And that's been the biggest change for me.
When you mention looking back on things and realizing that it's happened for you, that immediately puts you in a state of gratitude. And if you can feel grateful for like the husband or boyfriend or relationship that was really, really toxic, and people can get to that place, right? You can get to a place where can be very forgiving of that kind of thing. And you say, you know what? This all had to happen to get me where I am today. It's grace, right? It puts you in a completely different place. And your life looks very different in retrospect. And that's what I think the healing's all about, right? So how did you parlay this into, because I'm just fascinated by, you were behind the camera. Women were in front of the camera. You were behind the chair. I'm just metaphorically, right? You were helping people to look beautiful on the outside and put forth a image, I guess you would call it. How did you find the work with women and how did this come about where you started helping women to really look at kind of inner beauty?
So because of my varied career paths, I guess I had a different group of clients or followers from different genres. And the majority of everyone had found me through photography. And some clients had stayed with me since the very beginning. So that makes me feel good when people have stuck around since the early days. But, I would still do the wedding shows, but I would also do other like local vendor events. And I was also passionate about education. So I would go back to the beauty schools and the hair schools and do guest instruction or guest talks and talk to people about how important it was to create the life you wanted to live and the business that you wanted to have. And I guess through like collaborations, like I just kind of had my hand in everything. I wasn't big into a lot of like networking groups. I think that's still big with, that's a big aspect of marketing your business, but it was a lot of repeated clients and referrals, which was great. Word of mouth is like worth its weight in gold. It's priceless. And so I just had some really great clients that turned into friends and have maintained supporting me through all these years. So a lot of times I would do like contests and just different things, I just wanted to work and collaborate with a lot of different artists, no matter what I was doing, be able to have my own creative expression with my clients. So I don't know. It's just been a combination of everything that kind of got the word out. But I think a good chunk of the people who follow me now or who are newer along the journey are the women who I started focusing on with doing my over 40 portrait campaign.
Tell me about that.
So that's something I started last year. Yeah. I wanted to highlight women over 40 who, whether they were already at a certain accomplishment or point in their lives, but as long as they were over 40, because I wanted to showcase beauty, power, strength, resilience, everything that comes along with being 40 and up. And I created an experience for them to come in and we would customize how they wanted to be photographed and we talk about wardrobe, all the things, get them completely prepared and excited and educated to come in, and they would either shop their own closet for items that they already had to be photographed in, and I would give them like a magazine to help them pick out colors, everything to prepare them, because I wanted it to be a really, really nice experience, especially if it was for like a milestone birthday that you were doing this kind of photo shoot for to celebrate. We would do their hair and makeup. We would style their outfits, create different sets for them throughout the studio, and just treat them like a celebrity and a movie star for the photo shoot. And that just became a big focus of mine, because I was also experiencing all these great things and this whole own transformation of my life at the same time all these clients that I had were. So it was like we were all supporting each other. And it was great because they would also come in, and during their photo shoot, I would do interviews with them and ask them about their views on the beauty industry as a whole, and how, if they felt like aging was celebrated or kind of shunned in their experience. And I really just wanted to talk about taking care of, well, not taking care of, obviously taking care of yourself, but prioritizing self-care and doing things that you wanted to do in your life and living your life on purpose out loud. Because I really wanted to just create a group of women who were really excited about getting older, not looking at it like it was like a death sentence. So I did that through the campaign. And at the end of it, I had a big gala and rented out a big venue, had music, DJ, photo booth, all the things. And all the women who had been in this particular campaign, I invited them back and had portraits of each of them. And yeah, just a big like art show and celebration about women over 40.
When you interviewed these women, was there anything that came out of those interviews that were, yeah. I was going to say,
gosh.
Can you share anything that, because it's interesting to know that we all have our thoughts and feelings about our own sense of beauty, whether it's in ourselves, other people, internally, all of that. Did you find that there was a lot of conversation around that? Because I know the work that you do with women now is around that, right? It's about self-image and age and all of those things.
Yeah. All of the women, they had different stories and some of them were bad stories, and how they've overcome their own circumstances, but they all had a common thread. And it was just so fascinating to hear their stories about how they viewed themselves before they came in and then after they were finished with the shoot. And so that is the experience that I wanted to create from the very beginning when I started my photography business. So those first few days of getting started in boudoir and then opening my first studio, that is the goal that I wanted to have, was for them to come in and just play dress up for the day. Because just because you had reached a certain age doesn't mean that you need to give up on your imagination or having fun or just dressing up just because. I mean, we get tied up with being moms and, partners and everything, and they feel guilty if they do anything nice for themselves. So I just wanted to create a place where people could feel like they could do that. And so I had finally created it. And I got to this point in this past year also, after experiencing this huge growth in my business and all these things. And I started to see the reality of how I literally was making all these dreams of mine come true from putting in the work. I got to the point now where I'm like, it's not enough. And I don't know if that's the workaholic in me, or I don't know, but I feel like I'm on to something very big, I guess, in my own mind, because I've started creating a way to give these clients that come to me now an experience where they're able to work on their self-esteem, their mindset, and pour into themselves and do all the same journey that I took myself with my own situation. I want to help them take that journey so that before they come to me for a photo shoot, they've gone through this personal inner transformation. So it's not anymore about the photo shoot itself. That's like a cherry on top. That's just a nice celebratory experience to have. What I had been trying to get to through these experiences was to, experience that confidence in yourself for real, and not devote it to, well, I'm going to feel nice after I see my pictures or after I get my hair and makeup done. For me, I wanted that experience to take place before the photo shoot.
Well, I love that. And I was going to say the one thing that comes to mind when I think of photo shoots and just, I mean, and once again, going back to your photography and how it is really amazing what you do. But I think about that level of confidence that women probably walk out of your studio with. For some people, that's just the beginning of the conversation, right? So, you may find people that are coming to you for one reason, one reason, and they leave. They've learned something completely different that they weren't expecting to learn about themselves and about their abilities. Because I just think that I agree with you. I think at a certain age, we get less, it's like, oh, I'm going to get dressed up to go out to, we don't do that every weekend like we used to do. And so now it's kind of this, I think there's a space there really of opportunity to help women who maybe are coming into their own, even in the moment at that point, and then saying, because what you have to offer, I feel like, Amy, is it's so much deeper than what you have to offer, which is all of this talent and all of this creativity. So it's like you have all of the wonderful things that you can provide for women aesthetically. And then you have this sort of inner soul that can help people in so many different situations. And I mean, just talking to you, you are such an authentic person. You are so, I feel like you're more in touch, obviously, it sounds like, with yourself than you've been when you were, as we all do as we get older.
Yes.
And so what you have to offer is so important. I don't think it's being a workaholic. I think something sparked in you. And I think you're going to that next level, right? You know that it's needed and you know that you can deliver that for people and whatever that ends up looking like.
Right. And I'm open to the possibilities. I guess when I was younger, I used to think that this is the only path that I can go on. I have to be a magazine photographer. And that, like, looking back, it's like, that was just like a tiny piece of what I ended up getting interested in and falling in love with, because it's so much deeper than the aesthetics of it. And it's not necessarily anything I think is a pivot or new information. It's just finding the right way to present it to people, because it's such a big idea. I feel like it's a simple idea, and I think it's a necessary opportunity for people. And I also know that I can't save everyone from their situations. That's up to each person individually,
But if you can get people to think differently about their lives, I mean, I think you're right. We're not all able to get out there and save the world from themselves, because we all have to go down our paths to learn. So, like you're saying, in terms of the period of time that they're going to be coming to some kind of an awareness around their inner beauty may not be while they're sitting in your chair. It could be after they talk to you, or it could be before they come in, where they've made some kind of revolution that they're like, I want to treat myself kind of like what you did, right? I want a little self-care. Let's do some self-care here.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to catch people on different ends of the spectrum. I think it's an idea that's evolving. I like the word evolution, because evolving is it's the seed's been planted. You know that it's coming. It's like any creative work. It's happening, but it just needs to sort of be birthed, and you need to give it time to do that. So this, of course, interrupts my next question, because my next question was going to be, so what's next? But do you have an idea? Can you give us a little teaser of what you're thinking?
I think I have discovered along the way what my target client is, or my, just who I feel most resonate with what I'm trying to do, are definitely women over 40 who are going through some big transition in their life. So I'm always going to be involved with offering that type of transformation. And whether that's through my coaching or just some other kind of entity under that, I feel now I need to address the creative side of being a business owner, or being a creative business owner there, because that's also been a big chunk of what I have done. I have worked with a lot of photographers and other makeup artists and people in the industry. And I've always been drawn to that kind of community of collaboration. And it's hard as any business owner, but as a creative, especially, because we have this need at the beginning to be so competitive with each other. And it's not even necessary. we can do so much better when we collaborate and work together on things. Because when like multiple creative people come together, like you imagine the amount of beautiful things that can be created from that. So I feel drawn to also work on coaching more of the creative entrepreneurs and beauty professionals under the same idea to kind of collaborate, keep that community going, and just creatively express yourself. So I'm working on that. And I definitely want to speak more. I feel like a lot of the self-value and confidence that I like to talk about and encourage people with would be great for like middle school students or high school students, because I feel like for myself, I prioritized relationships and the idea of romantic relationships since that age. If I had learned back then, obviously, if I hadn't gone through all that, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now and learned all the lessons. But had my older self told my younger self that, you know, how important it really was to not lose your identity and put priority on other things instead of yourself, I think it would have helped me a lot in my decision making.
And that brings me to this question. How do you feel you've changed? So if you look back at yourself at 30, 35, whatever age you want to look back at, when maybe you were kind of in the muck of it, and where you are now, what have you learned about yourself?
So I've always been an independent person, and I think that has come from being in situations where I could only rely on myself. So I've only become more independent, but in a good way. I have also stopped being a gatekeeper about all the lessons I have learned. Growing up in the early years of my business, I always felt like I had to struggle so much independently. See, that was that. I was only reliant on myself because I couldn't trust anyone else. I taught myself a lot of things and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. So I felt like I did the experimenting and I had to teach myself that I used to gatekeep information. Like when people want to pick my brain and ask, well, how did you do that? I would not tell them because I felt like I don't want you to steal my ideas. And that was something I had to get through. And now I'm not like that anymore, especially with other creatives. I'm like, you know what you could do to make this better or change this or look at it from, I love sharing information now. So that's a big thing that's changed. I've always been a grateful person. I've always been appreciative of everything that I've experienced, good or bad. But now it's like, I feel guilty if I don't like express gratitude or just acknowledge how grateful I am every day, because I feel like that's a huge seed that can only grow and benefit in your life from maintaining gratitude about everything.
What you're describing to me is just being open, right? You're being open to now share your wisdom, share your insight, because you've learned a lot along the way. And there's things that you can impart into others or impart onto others that can help them. But gratitude's it's so underrated. People don't realize, like, gratitude, I feel like literally opens us up. It just opens you up to opportunity. It opens you up to all of the, overcoming a lot of the challenges internally. And just, I don't know, it's a better place to be. So it sounds like you're right on target. You're exactly where you need to be, Amy. I think you're exactly where you need to be.
I think we all are exactly where we need to be.
But isn't it a winding road to get here? That's the fun part.
Yeah. And I think if we're less reluctant to just let go of trying to control everything and just like sit back and be like, okay, what's this teaching me? Or let me enjoy this. Like whether it's
very
good or
freeing.
Bad.
It's a very freeing place to be, right? Because you don't have to be looking over your shoulder anymore. And I think when we're younger, sometimes it feels like we need to do that. But Amy, I am so excited that you said yes to come join us, because you are such a beautiful soul and you create such beauty. I'm telling you, everybody needs to go see. I'm going to put Amy's links in the show notes, but you have to go see her work. It is really beyond. It really is. And I cannot wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so excited. I don't know. Well, it might completely change tomorrow, but we'll see.
We're going to be keeping an eye on you. And thank you again, Amy. It was such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's it for now. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Journeys Through Change podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us and leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode. And share it with a friend or on social media to spread the good word, so more women like you can find us and join in on the fun. For more information on the podcast or Day by Day book, go to livedaybyday.com.